Yes. You probably have to agree with the recording from that end.
Yeah.
It is recording. Oh, look at that. And then we can just say hello again.
Hello.
Cup of coffee.
Cheers. Coffee. I knew
Ah,
I was on the right track when I I'm making another coffee. Got to have a coffee for the chat.
always, always. Well, Dan, shall we talk about your play, Iago Speaks, this wonderful play?
Sure, happy to. As most playwrights are. I love to talk about my work.
In the spotlight. No, I love this. We are about a month away from starting rehearsals here in Winnipeg, and for what will be the second production of this play. So it's officially a Canadian classic right now, which is
Right.
fantastic.
Two productions pretty much makes it that. It
But
gets beyond post-production, it's gotten somewhere.
that's right. That's right. And I have no doubt it's gonna go other places in the future because it is like I really, I saw the original production that Krista directed at in Saskatchewan, and then reading the script again after thinking about programming it for SIR, I just fell in love even more with it. And yesterday I watched the National Theatre broadcast of the Motive and the Cue. Did you get to see that
No,
or
I
read?
haven't, but I'm going to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating because again, it's a play about theater, right? It's a play about, and I think like your play, it came out of that impulse during the pandemic to talk about theater, right? Was your play Iago Speaks sort of like a pandemic project for you, or or were you working on it way before the pandemic ever became a thing?
Yeah, we would go back probably 10 years to when I first hatched the idea and was banging away an early draft. It goes back a long time, much long before the pandemic. Uh, yeah, it was just something that I was tooling with in my head. And the funnest plays are the ones that no one's waiting for or no one wants, and you are the sole motivator for getting this moving. It becomes more precious, I think, or something like that. So I was still living in Regina, and I had this idea that I'd been kind of playing around with in my head. I probably for a while, the plays that I generally end up writing, like putting down into a computer or even writing notes about, are the ones that live in my head for quite some time and they won't go away. And
Hmm.
there's lots of ideas that come, but they kind of drift away. And this one was something I'd really, really was enjoying playing with in my head before I went, okay, how would I do this? That kind of thing. So it goes way back before the pandemic when I really got started with it.
Well, that's amazing. But it felt to me like when I saw it in 2022, it felt to me like the perfect play to come out of the
Yeah.
pandemic with, because it is about, I mean, like, what are plays about? I hate that question because we go, what is this play about? And I'm asked as an artistic director all the time to go like, what's this about? And I have to kind of give them like 10 words that kind of, summarize what a play is about. And your play is about many things, but it is at the center of it is this questioning of like, why storytelling? What is storytelling? What is theater? Both as a structure, like being in a place and the placement of the audience, but also what is this thing that we keep repeating over and over, this ritual of repetition, right, which is the crux of theater making. But so it felt to me like when I saw it, it was a great way to go back into live theater. Did you feel like that's why you felt like it was a time to program it, to put it on the stage and test it when we came out of the pandemic?
Well, that was partly by accident, really, because it had had a fair bit of attention early on or earlier because it's an old play that I drafted and redrafted and then shelved and moved on to other things and going, maybe someday, that kind of thing. It sat for a while as an
Mm-hmm.
idea, but even as an idea, I hadn't harnessed exactly what it was yet. It was a bit unruly in earlier drafts in the sense that, like you said, it's about many things. Well, even in the earlier drafts, it was even about more things, too many things. And I wasn't sure really where the play truly lived, if it was gonna, if it was gonna end up on stage where it needed to live as a play. And my focus early on was on Iago, even though I had this jailer and Iago from the very beginning. I really thought that this was going to be a play about why Iago shuts up, why he, that kind of thing. So that's where the Iago Speaks. I jump at a title really quickly in early drafts, and then that's it, no matter what happens to the play. And but I like the title in a certain way as well. So I was really thinking that this was what it was going to be. But as that evolved, I went, oh, that's really boring. I don't care why Iago decides to speak when that's the typical play. That's the play you expect it to be.
Mm.
Uh, let's answer that question finally, kind of thing. But that's a boring answer because it's just in the context of, well, something happened to me in my life and this is what I did and this is why I was motivated and that's why I ended up not speaking, like vowing not to speak. But there was a much more, as soon as I became acquainted, if you want to say that, with the jailer, as the jailer became something more and more, I was like, oh, this is the jailer. Like the jailer is the dude. He may or may not care why Iago speaks or not, but he is. And the more I found the jailer, the more I was finding the play. So that's really,
Cool.
and
That's beautiful.
so to answer your question finally about the workshops and the production, it had early readings. It had some interest from a couple of theaters, kind of like, well, in fact, Shakespeare on the Sask was interested in it earlier, and there would be ongoing conversations. But as things go, it drifted because I wasn't convinced that I was ready to hand it over. I still thought it needed a fair bit of work. I went and did a residency at UNB for a summer, and I worked on it. It was one of the projects that I brought with me to officially work on, and I chopped 30 pages out of it there. And it was from there that I went, okay, now it's starting to live in a real way. I think I know what this is. I harnessed it during that time. In fact, did a reading of a chunk of it at my final playwright in residence reading kind of thing at the end of my residency.
That's so cool. And I love, and the jailer is, and as somebody who, I spent a few years in Stratford, and then and in those first seasons, you play a fair bit of those,
Mm.
you know, soldier number three,
Right.
doctor whatever, or spear holder, and it's there are quite a bit of those, in the canon, way more than the actual named characters. And sometimes we'll have big characters with no name for no reason, and we go, why, right? And there's a project that one of our associates at SIR has been working on for a few years, about those unnamed characters and what drives them. Like in particular, those two murderers in Richard III, like
Yeah.
because they're so rich. They have like one or two scenes, but they're so rich in in just life. And I find that Shakespeare does that. He will give you this massive battle scene, and then we go zoom in with like somebody called the boy or whatever, right? Or and you have the jailer. Um, as a playwright, when you look at the dramaturgy of Shakespeare's dramaturgy and his touch, why do you think that is? Like, do you think he's being lazy, or he's practical? Like, because he's got all these very functional characters, but they have life in them. And then you expand on that idea with the jailer in search of an identity, of a purpose, and of a name. Do you like what are your thoughts on all these unnamed heroes, or not so many heroes, but just sort of like unnamed presences in Shakespeare's plays?
Honestly, I think having read so many, loving, first of all, so many of those little digression scenes between two characters or between the main character and this, we can take the grave digger scene in Hamlet as an example of that, right? I really believe that's where the playwright lives. That's where the playwright is having fun, right? If you think of Shakespeare and what he was trying to do in a big way, political, like wars and battles, and trying to stay on the right side of the narrative all the time, being fully conscious of who out there is watching and supporting him or not, that kind of thing. So he has to toe the party line when it comes to the big narratives, this war, this battle, this king, that kind of thing. So I think he's in a certain way forcing himself to be good and to be the right playwright for those scenes and in terms of even the big storylines. But where he gets to live, where he gets to play, where he gets to have fun is those characters. I mean, I recognize that immediately when well, the jailer is a perfect example. I'm having the fun, right, in that area, and I'm not being pretentious about this is this kind of very important kind of play. So every time I read or see a scene that Shakespeare has created, it always feels to me like, oh yeah, that now he's just playing around. He's having the fun. He gets to do what he wants to do finally for a few minutes, to keep him vital and keep like, I'm still a playwright. I can still do this.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's a beautiful way of expressing that. So then clearly you do have fun with the jailer. Like you put in his mouth the language of today, and you poke fun of Shakespearean language and Shakespearean acting, right? And many of your directions are like he steps forward in a grand Shakespearean pose, and you get to make fun of this idea of what Shakespearean theater is, and then you can deconstruct that and have fun with that. But then you also, of course, write Iago's lines, and you have to work, I guess, in a way, as the bridge between the original first, Othello, and then this being the sequel. How did you write his language? Did you really look into how he speaks in the play, Othello, and then you sort of like, and you don't really quite write in verse most of the time. It's laid out on the page as prose, but it is quite different in terms of sonic experience than the jailer. How did you even begin that process?
Actually, I think it comes from my years of teaching high school and teaching Shakespeare at most grade levels at some point. You as a teacher, as you probably know, you learn more as a teacher than in any other environment. That is the greatest learning experience. And breaking down language and asking students or teaching students about how blank verse works or what that kind of thing is. So I had that in my background. And of course, having seen a lot of Shakespeare and having absorbed Shakespeare tone and rhythms and stuff like that. So that was kind of second nature to know that part of it. But what I did have to do was explore a simple Shakespeare line and how they are constructed. So I looked, when I did the small amount really of research that I did do was to plumb what a line looks like, how where the words go in a line in Shakespeare so that they seem to be most dramatic or most poignant. And what I was discovering was that what often Shakespeare seems to do is put the most important thing near the end and build to it, right? The most important aspect of the thought, it builds to it. You don't let it all out initially, right? It's this really interesting way of, even within a small speech, how much construction there seems to be. For him, it was probably after a while very second nature, and he probably recognized what was working or what he liked to hear on stage and went, that's a good line. I'm going to keep working towards that. But that's what I noticed was there was a kind of a reversal of the way we normally talk in prose, where you start to, it becomes poetic when you take any line, any sentence we have can become poetic if you screw around with the words a little bit and kind of reshape the sentence, and suddenly it sounds just a little fresher, more alive, or something like that. And so I did that a lot. Sometimes I would just write in prose and then start to switch things around and go, where can this adjective go that would actually color this line best right now? And so that's what I started to do. So I would tear things apart and then rebuild them.
Oh, that's amazing. It's true. And the jailer himself goes like, why you talk backwards? Right? He
Yeah.
goes like, why do you put the crux of the information at the end of it? And then I love how Iago's like, well, this is how I speak. This is how I am, and you are the way you are, and this is how I am. And I do it fascinates me that they have those different rhythms, and you can hear that in the play. So when did the idea of the jailer, not just being this, you know, working man in search of a larger purpose, which is, the tragedy and the beauty of all of our lives as the protagonists of our lives, as we try and find the purpose for our existence. Um, where did the clown aspect come into it? Because you're very clear on the jailer must have something about him that is clownish, and people have assumptions of what a clown is. And
Mhm.
can you break down a bit of like your idea of what a clown is and how that came into being in this play?
Yeah, there's a few aspects to that. First of all, I just simply love clown in its most common way. I'm not talking about even clown performance
Mm.
or the way we think of the way pop culture thinks of clown, right? That kind of thing. But if you dig deeper into clown, there is there's a deeper understanding of what clown really is and a sadness to gray clowning, right? So there's but the sadness comes from a deep desire to not be a clown, to be something more, to be important. So clown is always most poignant when they're trying so hard to attain this thing that seems is something as simple as opening an umbrella, but somehow it's unattainable, and all of these other things get in the way of accomplishing that goal, where the clown is just kind of falling into this rabbit hole of stupidity as they try to sort this thing out in order to sort this thing out. Right. I love that. I could watch it all day from good clowning. Right. So that's just a deep love for that. And I often, if I wanted to write a character, I would kind of go there a little bit, but most of my plays were never deliberate comedies. So one of the things that I was set out to do with Iago Speaks was, damn it, I'm writing a freaking comedy. I am gonna go for it. But I was setting all of these barriers, these boundaries in my way, right? I'm writing a comedy, but it's two characters in a dungeon cell and they're not going anywhere else. And for a good chunk of it, it's kind of hyper realism. You can't go anywhere. You're just here. How am I going to do this? So I was putting that in my way. Well, one of the things that I knew I had to do was take him, the jailer, and really turn him into a clown, right? Like that way he can do whatever he wants. Like there's a certain permission to just go crazy. So that was one aspect. I have a close friend who's an actor, who was an actor, and I channeled him the entire time I was writing Iago Speaks. In fact, for the longest time, I assumed he would be the first jailer, and then pandemic hit and he became a trucker, and so he's driving trucks all over North America now. He's going to come to opening because he lived just south of Winnipeg in the St. Anne area. But I told him as I was writing it, oh, you're going to be the clown. You're going to be the jailer, like just so you know. And things, and he read the first reading with Sky. He was the original. He came to my house in Saskatoon, and he read the first time we did a reading of it. So I was also channeling him, but interestingly enough, and like in such a good way, Josh came along and brought this whole other aspect to the clown that I hadn't really envisioned, or if I had, just kind of in a superficial way. So that kind of also added to how the clown kind of grew and morphed, because Josh started reading, like we did quite a few dramaturgical readings for several months leading to opening. And so I was now channeling Josh in the clown
Mm.
rewrites and stuff like that as it came closer to going into rehearsal. So that's kind of the ballpark. And I'm a huge clown. If you let me go, it's scary. It's dangerous. Like it really gets that way. Yeah.
No, clown is great. He's great. And again, it's a great. I love how you say I'm gonna write a comedy, and in essence, it is. But then within the play, the clown, the jailer, is like, is this a comedy or is this a tragedy? Like, where are we? And then in a way concludes that it's more like a tragedy because of something that happens in it. But tonally, of course, we are dancing around those two, you know, pieces of music, of a tragic one and a comedic one, and it is quite fluid that way, right? The other piece we're doing this summer here at SIR is A Midsummer Night's Dream,
Mm.
and of course, there's a famous play within a play there. It's sort of like the centerpiece of the play. Did you take an inspiration from that kind of, tonally speaking, of those kind of kinds of plays that Shakespeare wrote? Because there is something quite, when the jailer and Iago are trying to figure out what this play is while making a play, there's an event that happens that is quite moving. Actually, it's quite a moving, unexpected moment. Very much like the moment in the play within the play in Dream with Thisbe and
Pyramus.
thank you very much. That's the cold medicine.
Okay. Okay.
Where am I? Pyramus and Thisbe. And it's quite moving after a bunch of goofing around. Did you think about that? Like, did you think about there must be an event here that actually feels like it grabs our heart amidst the clowning and the goofiness? Was that conscious, or that kind of just came naturally to you?
That's a good question. I was sure channeling the things I knew about those types of characters in Shakespeare, right? Like there's so much clown in the Midsummer Night's Dream play within a play, for example. Like they're all like those mechanicals are really just clowns in a certain sense, and they take themselves very seriously. They're really, that kind of thing, right? So that in essence turns them into clown as they think they're doing amazing work and they're tumbling, everything's falling apart. So I was sure aware or cognizant of kind of how that kind of works in that framework, but I don't think I was actually thinking of a particular series of characters or a particular play. I was more channeling what the jailer was and needed, right? It's this because it speaks to that moment, for example, speaks to a much deeper need that is at the essence of the play itself, right? When Iago when the jailer is really wanting what he wants. In fact, it's what he deeply wants that ends up being the crux of the play, right? When it ends up changing everything. I won't give anything away, but it's his deep desires that actually shape his actions and shape everything that happens to him. So that deep desire has to be there somewhere amidst all this clowning around and all of this kind of acting, posturing, and all that kind of stuff.
That's great. As a playwright, do you have you been in your career more often, have you been surprised and delighted by how people interpret their plays and the way they produce them? Or are you more often like going like, I don't think they got it. Like, like real talk. Like, are you, because there is the thing, that it's a question, are writers in full control of the thing they created? Or is it more of an unstable subjective thing they put out into the world, and then a director or a group of actors or designers will then take that and transform it, and then you go, wow, I never saw that coming from the thing I wrote? Where do you sit sometimes in terms of like letting go of that creation and seeing it become something else? Or are you often going like, I don't think they got the thing?
It's been a real cross section of both in my experiences. And I definitely had some early experiences as an early playwright, um, where I had a production team kind of go, okay, thank you. You just stay over there and don't worry your pretty little head. We're going to take care of this for you, right? That kind of thing. And being a new playwright at the time, I was like, okay, great, thanks a lot, right? And then seeing and going, no, you're not getting this. No, 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 wait, whoa, that kind of thing. And either being too polite or too quiet to interrupt and go, well, I have to trust them. Or any number of reasons why I might not intervene, or it's assumed that I won't intervene or I shouldn't. So over the course of time, a few things happened. One, and I think any playwright who's got a fair bit of experience will attest to this, you have to go with, I mean, especially if your play is all over the place, you have no control over who's doing what to what, and that happens to certain plays and certain playwrights at various times. But if you have a next production and you have contact, like in our case, you have next production, and contact with the team and stuff like that, and there's some consultation, then you know that there's some control or some influence that you can exercise over choices and things like that. So you're choosing to go ahead with the team and to trust them on the condition that they're listening to you and that you're helping to illuminate some things that they may or may not get, or they may or not have not yet appreciated and stuff like that. So that happens. I think there's always an element of trust, and for sure there are moments or there are creations from a production where you go, oh my gosh, I never would have imagined this, but this is fantastic. You know, this is more than I could have conceived of, and it's better, that kind of thing. I started as a playwright to impose things in this text to guide it in certain directions. And not so much an actor needs to say this way, but this is the tone or feel of this moment, and I would try to capture it in some way so that the team, the design team and the director are kind of being guided in this direction. So there's a bit of both. I've tried to distance myself in my writing from imposing too much in certain ways, but at the same time, I'm directing as I write quite often, and I'm going, this is how this has got to be, or it's not going to work. It's just not going to work any other way. And you know as well as I do, in comedy, it's really, really like it's okay in drama. It actually has more kind of flexibility in terms of how this might unfold. In comedy, if it doesn't work this way, it's just not going to work, right? It's just like all of that. So that's an important aspect. So I think that's where I kind of evolved. I definitely evolved as I experienced different productions.
That's great. Are you feeling nervous about us taking this beautiful piece and then putting it outdoors? How do you feel about that? Because in many ways, I was my kid woke me up at 4:22 in the morning yesterday, and then I couldn't go back to sleep. I had only 4 hours of sleep by then, and then he went back to sleep. But in a fit of searching for inspiration, I just worked on Iago Speaks, and I sat down with a cup of coffee before the sun rose, and I just kind of kept going with my prep. And I can see it in my head as the director, how we're gonna I can see it. I can see the choreography of it. I can see the where we're gonna put it in the ruins. I can see how we're gonna, quote unquote, adapt, solve that final piece. I can see it so clearly. I mean, whether we're gonna be able to achieve it how it's in my head, it's the part of the process of rehearsal. But I can see how we can make this wonderful piece work out there. But are you nervous about this sort of like structural adaptation of it?
Not really. Space, I think the old me would have been very nervous. And the old me is just me with this play 3 years ago or something like that. Because when I initially conceived of the play, it felt to me like it had to be in a very dedicated space that had, right, the way, as you know, the way the play works, it feels like if anything is interfering with it, it just breaks apart. But I think I channeled some of that as I was rewriting The Jailer and imagining the jailer and where the jailer is in comparison to where Iago is. And the jailer can literally be anywhere. We had these conversations prior to the opening at Shakespeare on the Sask. There's a helicopter that a Stars ambulance helicopter that lands on the Children's Hospital landing pad directly across the river. And there's no ignoring that helicopter. Like boom, it's there. And sometimes thankfully doesn't last very long, but it's fairly overpowering. You can still hear the actors and stuff, but it's there. And I said to Krista, the director, and Josh, I said, given how the jailer is here, but somewhere else at the same time, he could actually literally hear that helicopter and it wouldn't be a big deal. Like he could be, right? He could just be responding to anything because of the nature of what that does. So in a certain sense, it doesn't matter anymore. I've let go of some of those imposed restrictions that I had early on in the play, early on in the drafts, to let it be what it is because of how the jailer has evolved. It has very little to do with the story or anything like that. It's just his mind state and all of that. So, and then you've seen the production, you saw the play. So I trust that you now know what it mostly is and how it can be adapted. I would trust it less if someone went, I'm just going to do this play and then we're going to do it outside. You know, they may not really be aware of what they're dealing with yet. And then we've had several big conversations about how we can fashion the ending to suit the outdoors and stuff like that. So I'm fascinated. I'm not worried because it's going to be what it's going to be, and we'll just kind of sort it out from there. So yeah,
I'm
I'm
excited.
pretty comfortable with it, really. Like,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
good. That's good. I'm pretty excited. It's gonna be a fun time.
yeah.
And yeah, one final question then I think I'll throw at you. What do you hope Winnipeg audiences will walk away with from this play? That famous question. What are your desires in terms of like of our audiences experiencing this play? How do you want them to walk away from the ruins, feeling?
Some of my favorite plays are ones that are really well built, but they feel like just a romp. They feel like they are just fun, and there's not enough of those plays out there. I don't mean light comedies. Like there's a fair number of those that are built to sell, or they're built for community theater or for festival, like summer festival type theater and stuff like that. But there's another kind of play that is really funny, but really tightly structured and just kind of that kind of thing. I wanted to write a play that I don't see that much. And it's a play that is just really fun. Like, let's let go and just see what we can do. And so the thing that I'd like our audiences to take away the most is that they just had a really good time. Like they really had fun, that this was surprising and delightful and a little frightening and all of those things all at once, but they come away just shaking their head and going, holy shit. There's just like, because that's the kind of response we got at Shakespeare on the Sask with this play. People were like, oh my God, like that kind of thing was really, really, and that's where I was trying to go with this. Was I just think that we are, as playwrights, as theater producers, all of that, we are in an insanely earnest time. We need plays with big messages and all of these causes and social justice causes and stuff like that, all of which have value and merit. But I don't get enough of these other plays. And I think the essence of theater, the true nature of where theater is in those plays, where we are not trying too hard. We are having a great time together as a community and just taking this in. So that, to me, that would be it. Like they don't need to go too deep. At the same time, if they do, great, because it's such an existential exploration that this play goes on.
I love
Like,
that.
what
I
is
love that.
reality?
Yep, I love that. Imagination, boundless imagination. That's wonderful. Well, what a beautiful note to wrap things up. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.